A couple of thoughts now around the whole issue of human rights and corporate responsibility. And I think it is a bit of a challenge in that understanding what really human rights means within a corporate responsibility context is complex. When we talk about corporate responsibility, we always take compliance with legislation as the minimum base. So if a company is not respecting minimum wage requirements or working hour requirements and so forth and so on, they evidently cannot stand up and claim and say, you know, we are the best in class, we are the best company here and there. And I'm sure we can go through endless lists of companies and find good things and bad things, and things are changing. And I think Esther referred to pennies, and you know that's definitely an example of a company that probably wouldn't have put top of our lists when we're thinking of the most ethical companies, but evidently there's a huge volume of work going on that it's very significant and very impactful. So first of all is what do we fit in there? You know, if you have a program on if you have very robust workplace practices, are you complying with human rights? If for instance your supplier in Southeast Asia has children working in the manufacturing of your products, and I'm sure several athletic sports companies are coming to your mind, are they violating human rights? Is that a one-sided issue? Are there issues around paying minimum wages in countries and complying with the paying of a minimum wage, which is very clear that it's not a living wage in those countries? If you are, for instance, manufacturing cigarettes, can you have a human rights approach where maybe the product that you're producing might be seen by some people as harmful to health and damaging? Can that be, is that a human rights violation or not? That is definitely a challenge, and I think what we have seen is that Irish businesses are finding it difficult to articulate what is that they should do or they should not do. There's a website on business and human rights, I think it's business-humanrights.org, and 271 global corporations are mentioned there to have very articulated human rights policies. But if you look at it, there's very little information about how they implement and how they ensure compliance with those policies. So not only we need policies, but we need to ensure compliance. Corporations, as you very well know, are global, and they operate in multiple geographical areas with multiple legal systems. Where does the liability lie? And I'm sure all of you are probably familiar with the John Ruggie recommendations on the whole issue of UN guidelines on business and human rights. And I think everybody would agree that his approach on protect, respect and remedy has been very much welcomed. But the issue of how these guidelines are going to be implemented, monitored, enforced, policed is still a big challenge, and I think that's something that we should all consider. There are ways of tackling this and responding to this. If you look at schemes, there are a number of global schemes, for instance, such as the United Nations Global Compact, which is a coalition of global corporations that have signed up to a number of principles, including them respect for human rights. And there's explained each one of them, and companies, there's a couple of Irish companies that have signed up to it, such as Smurfit Kappa and Musgrave, and every year they have to provide a written documentation what type of work they're doing to comply with those principles. Having said that, there's a number of critics of the UN Global Compact. Disclosure is something very important. When companies disclose information about their corporate responsibility performance, there are internationally recognized toolkits for disclosing this type of information. There's one called the Global Reporting Initiative, which is critical because there's over 1,000 companies in hundreds of countries that are using this type of guidelines, and there's a whole section on human rights. So there you can see, and I could mention probably 5 or 10 Irish companies that are using those guidelines to disclose on their own performance. Very particularly on the area of the apparel industry, there's a coalition called SEDEX, if some of you have heard about it. But basically SEDEX is a database of suppliers in developing countries that have been audited, and that allows you as maybe a small Irish company that wants to acquire a particular clothing product and does not have the capacity to audit those suppliers to access and ensure that they have achieved a minimum number of requirements on, for instance, working practices and health and safety and so forth and so on. There's also a growing trend in terms of companies disclosing about their practices, and it is very important to for us as consumers, also as well as for businesses, to be more active. And I think before we started, Esther and I were discussing this issue. Irish consumers probably are not the first when it comes to thinking about activist consumers that are going to be demanding high standards of businesses. And maybe you can say, well, that's fair enough, we're in the middle of a recession and we just need to get value for money. But it's something that we need to consider as well. And same I would say about at the government level in terms of legislation. Legislation needs to evolve in this area, and it needs to provide further ways to encourage and promote businesses to get active here as well. So I think I might stop there, and if there's anything else I can come back to you. But just to say, definitely the corporate responsibility is something that is critical for the way a business is being viewed in terms of its operations and its impact. And I think not any company in any sector is exempt from it, and not even law firms are exempt from it. Thank you.